Seeing as I'm the instigator of this, I'll kick it off. Welcome to our DIGFM meeting for the second half of this decade. And we have a very special guest today, someone that I really admired the work that Heather Winkle did when she was at Claris, and she's moved on to do a number of different things at a lot of different companies and has a lot of experience and information and knowledge to share with us on her journey. I'd like to welcome Heather Winkle. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Vince. I'm so glad to be here. So happy to see so many familiar faces, and really excited to have this conversation. I'll start sharing, and let's see, make sure I can share, and I'll play my screen. And is everybody seeing it okay?
Yes, we see it. And one other mention is that Heather would like to hold questions for the end of the presentation. So thank you. Go ahead, Heather.
Thanks. And it won't be a long presentation. I actually developed this talk when I was talking at Ecosystems 2030. And it was to a group of leaders who get together every year from all around the world to really think about, where do we want to be in 2030? Where do we think the world is going? And leaders from lots of different industries sharing how they work, what they're concerned about, what they're excited about. It's just as much teaching as networking. And I was invited to speak sort of under the umbrella of AI, but from the vantage point of what I've seen over the 30 years that I've been doing this work now. And so I can't believe I'm saying this, but I feel like this might be one of the most exciting parts of my journey. And I feel like I've had some exciting parts of my journey already. But this is a chapter that I think is really making everybody stop and ask, is AI going to change everything? And that is something that I'd love to talk about today, especially with this group, because you are all probably already asking that question, thinking about how it fits into your work, how it fits into the products and tools that you're designing and building, and how are things really going to be changing as you move forward. And so really, I'm going to just talk a little bit about what I'm excited about and why this is such an exciting time. And then really some things that I'm worried about, and ultimately what I think you can do, what I'm encouraging my teams and colleagues and really peers across the industry to do. And so that's what we're gonna walk through. But before we do that, I want to start with just the really human perspective. I mean, because people on this planet have been creating tools to augment their experience with the world, to help them in some way. It's just human nature. We've always been making and innovating millions of years, where it might be a tool to protect ourselves or to clothe ourselves or feed ourselves. And then as inventions started to modernize, it was enabling us to live longer or travel further or share ideas more broadly. Maybe it gave us an opportunity to choose where we were going to live and how we were going to build out our society in this place where we could actually put some roots down. And then our tools actually started to outsource physical labor and repetitive tasks and enable us to do things more rapidly and more efficiently. And we started building these broader ecosystems and building these interdependencies and finding more sophisticated ways to outsource our manual and intellectual labor, being able to do complex calculations and simulations and models and analysis and really overcoming physical limitations, giving us ways we could experiment and understand the world around us. And all of that power became more personal with the personal computer and put that creativity and productivity right into people's hands. And then we were connecting those ideas with more and more people, first with wires and then across the air, and being able to store more and more data and moving it to the cloud and being able to access it and interact with it anytime and do that processing real time. And now we're stepping into this era of artificial intelligence and exponential technology where we are no longer just making simple choices. We're crossing into this threshold, and each of our choices now have the potential to have massive, massive ripple effects. And that is the essence of the work that I've been doing these years, and I think the work you do, which is we have the power to shape our tools. And from there on, our tools continue to shape us. And so the choices we're making as we do this are so critical. And when we think about the exponential power that AI is giving us, you can really see how those choices compound, and then the contexts themselves are compounding. And so this is what we're seeing in how social media has been evolving, and how we're asking questions about how far will our technology go? Will it outpace us? And so these are some of the things that have been on my mind as I consider what's the work I've been doing and the impact I've been putting into building and making, and what is the power in that, especially in companies where these choices affect millions of people all at one time. And so if I take a look back at how we do this work, well, wait a minute, that's not the slide that's supposed to be there. Give me just a second. Here we go. We're just going to take a quick look back, because I put this up as I reflect on what have I seen as I've been doing these jobs. And for those of you who know me or maybe don't know, my first job was right as Netscape was becoming a product, and the World Wide Web and internet were really becoming a thing that people could harness. And my first job was actually not just designing Netscape Navigator, but actually helping people who were like, what do we do with this new tool, with this new capability of having this internet, this web? And went to Intuit, where I was there as the interchange format for finance was coming online to actually talk with banks and move from physical checkbooks into digital virtual money, and onto Yahoo, where it wasn't just how do we give people place to be and communities and tools, but I was actually there in the early days of mobile. I designed all of Yahoo's original mobile apps on, Palm Pilots and pagers and, devices before smartphones. But really thinking about, how do you take these tools into your pocket? How do you enable people to do things in a highly mobile way? Of course, at the time, costly to make any taps. There was no real cloud at that moment. And so a really different set of design considerations, but like stepping away from your desk, moving to really helping eBay invent e-commerce and some of the first really complex shopping systems that are now fairly ubiquitous. I went to Adobe, where I didn't just design Acrobat and their workflow management, but I actually helped take Adobe to the cloud and imagine for the first time, how do tools like this operate both on your desktop and from the cloud, to working with FileMaker and Apple, and in particular, helping to think through designing and developing for various formats in an effective way, to Capital One, which was really transforming a bank from being brick and mortar into a fully digital bank experience, onto McAfee, which is all about AI and cybersecurity. And now at Delta, where I lead all of digital experience, product design and analytics, which is less how do you digitize air travel, because you really can't do that. Like, there are always going to be planes and pilots and people who are moving from place to place until we get into the whole teleportation thing. But how can a company like Delta harness technology to empower customers and the people who are serving those customers in a highly, highly complex, very physical operation? And so, as I talk through a couple of thoughts today, one of the things I'm reflecting on is what I've seen as patterns in all of these companies, in my peers across the industry. What am I seeing that I think could be helpful, a helpful reminder as we move into this AI chapter? And so we're going to take it now to the double diamond. And so you've probably heard me talk about a lot of these things in the past. And I think maybe the good news story is that it really hasn't changed. This idea that you can discover, you have to spend some time discovering what is the problem, who are the people, what do they need, what do they expect, and then how do you turn that into problem statements, and then how do you design for that, and then how do you hone in and actually deliver on that, and how do you repeat that? But one of the interesting things that wasn't part of the original, design thinking model was really, how does data factor into that process? How much can you learn from data that exists, or synthetic data that you might create to help you explore and understand and refine what it is that you're solving for? This is going to be a really new part of how people design and develop moving forward, because now we have the ability to incorporate data into all parts of the design process or the product development process, whether it's actual or synthesized, in order to test and learn in different ways. Now, what I'm seeing happen, what I've seen across a number of experiences, is that people tend to come in with a solution in mind and jump very quickly to that definition, slap on the design, and then go into test and learn delivery pretty quickly. And even just looking at this, you can see you might be missing the opportunities through discovery. You might have a solution that's looking for a problem. And you're probably missing out on some really critical data, whether it's consumer data, whether it's behavioral data, whether it's adjacent industry data, and the ability then to use that as you start to shape the solution. Another thing I see is that people come in with a solution and they actually say, you know what? We don't need to spend a lot of time designing and iterating. We're actually going to just put this right into market and let the users test and refine it for us, which is a little bit like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're only going to get response and reaction to what you've put out there, versus more open-ended, what's actually the problem and what are the ways into a solution. And lastly, I actually often see we're just going to put something into the market and then we'll refine it from there. And all of these are viable choices, and sometimes they're the right thing for timing or business needs or constraints. But it is the one big missed opportunity that I see over and over again, which is that measuring twice to cut once tends to go a long way. And so giving the space to actually explore is something that I encourage people to take the time for. It's a little bit slow down so you can speed up. And so I think that I'm going to show you a bit of an example on where this was a really powerful change of approach. And it was one of the early projects that I worked on at one of my last companies at Capital One. And the scenario was there was a customer who was behind on their credit card payments. And the solution that came to my design team there was, here, we're gonna have just a range of payment programs that this credit card user can, who's going into collections, like different ways that they can pay, and a web page that was gonna give them those opportunities to pay. And this was roughly what it looked like. And basically it was like, you can pay, or you can pay, or you can pay, or you can promise to pay. But this was really like a way to offer these different methods of payment that ultimately were like, that's just how the policy was written and how the team was going to move forward. And the research and design team said, but okay, that's a solution that might get people to click the button and pay, but what's really going on? Are these people really trying not to pay? Why? Why are they in collections? What has happened? And so the number one thing that remembering to take a step back does is that it gives you the space to find that human insight that could really dramatically change the course of the solution. And this, when we think about this future state of AI and how individual choices have this potential to have a ripple effect, you can start to think back to, like, you can work backwards and say, okay, if I've made a solution based on an assumption, that's only going to have so much impact. If I can really dig and uncover a human insight that starts to guide my choices, then I'm probably going to be solving that problem on a deeper human level that will ultimately make it a more viable, more sticky solution. And I'll have ways of testing that with consumers versus stabs in the dark. So in this scenario, the team went and did a lot of ethnographic research where they went and talked to people who were in the collection situation. And what they discovered was that these people, for the most part, weren't trying to get out of paying their credit card. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to rack up a bill and then move on. It was something had happened in their life that was making it impossible or difficult for them to make a payment. And they were stuck. And what they were looking for was a way for the company to meet them where they were. And so that insight of, actually, they want to pay us, they just can't, because maybe their electricity bill is due first, or they have to do something for their child before they can pay down a credit card. They're not going to get their paycheck until a week later, the date that we're asking them to pay. There are all of these reasons. And so the team said, hey, instead of giving them these like predefined ways of paying, what if we say, let's work together and find a payment option that works for you? We can build a plan. And so the language on the solution changed, the calls to action changed, and really it was just simplified down to build your plan. Now, full transparency, like the first version of this, build your plan, like basically, we were just trying to see if anybody would click that button. And then it would, go and be resolved some other way. But ultimately, we were hoping to create a digital solution so that the, customers could self-serve in this very personal, somewhat embarrassing, painful moment for them. And so rather than calling the call center, could we solve it digitally? So clicking on that was where, instead of giving them something predefined, the insight led to, let's ask them how much they can afford and how often they can pay and when they can make the first payment. Basically, the credit the policy writers were really concerned, like, what if they only want to pay $1? And what if they can only pay it once? And what if they can't pay it for 5 months? And we said, well, you know what? In the MVP version of this, let's see what they say. I mean, what do we have to lose? We can get, minimal click through on all these various options of other buttons on the first solution, or we can see. And the interesting thing here was that most people would put in 30, 40, 50, sometimes $100. And the more critical part was when. Like, it had to somehow coordinate with their paycheck, or when they knew that they would be able to have a little bit more than some of the other responsibilities. It was that critical change that absolutely changed the whole approach to the project. Now, that's simple, except behind the scenes, there was a ton of policy, credit policy, regulation, things that were baked deep into the code and the operations and how agents served the customers. And so, at first the product team was kind of like, there's no way we can change the policy. And we said, well, should we ask? Can we get the policy? Can we get the credit officer in here? And can we share with them, hey, here's the human insight. These people want to pay us. We're just not giving them a little bit of flexibility. How could we change that? Is that possible? And actually collaborating with the underwriters, with the people who might be the no's, actually was an opportunity to get creative and think outside the original box, so to speak. And so, while the first is finding that human insight, the second thing that not enough teams are doing is allowing for some imagination. I see a lot of teams immediately get stuck in constraints or assume that something is going to be too hard or an impossibility. But even if it's for like an hour, where you're like, okay, we're going to go into Happy Rainbow Land. And I don't know if any of you remember this, but when we were designing charting for the visual charting for the first time in FileMaker, I actually called it Happy Rainbow Unicorn Land, because it was like, look, we're just going to take a little while. We're going to think outside the box, and then we'll come back and we'll work through the real constraints. But, in that scenario, engineering wasn't really excited about like getting the first chart wrong the majority of the time. But we knew if you got it wrong once, then you could adapt and adjust and you'd get closer to getting it right faster. So just that breaking out and allowing some spark of imagination sometimes is all you need. And I think teams sometimes on this continuum of pure utility to crazy ideas think that we're going to just go to all the crazy ideas and we're going to expect all of them to happen, and then we're going to make demands of the code and it's going to take years to build. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actually just the one that moves us a little bit beyond basic utility and allows us to tap into that insight. So we're not just solving the functional problem, but we're solving it in a way that is more likely to really connect with the users, what they need, how they're feeling. So the language, the process, that is more likely to be engaging and sticky, and at the end of the day, probably going to drive more of those behaviors. So in this case, it was that how much can you afford to pay and when? And so we went to this and tested it out. And so you can see like really quite a difference in this process. Now, the thing that I think gets complicated is you can see organizationally, like if you imagine different teams who are coming up with different payment programs. In this case, like it was a separate team that was accountable for building all these things. And of course they had, KPIs and performance all tied to it. And part of, you can see how like each of them might be building technology that was going to be bespoke and unique. And it starts to, you can see how not just the front end solution, but actually all of the back end capabilities can start to get really redundant. And that's costly and probably is going to introduce more complexity, more bugs, harder to maintain over time. And so the third thing that I see companies and teams missing in service of getting a solution and getting something that is fully crafted in a timely way, it's easier to work in smaller silos to deliver on that. But actually thinking through where are the commonalities and how can you find those interdependencies and orchestrate them such that you're solving once and you are deploying in multiple places. And so back to this scenario for me, I was we were looking at this problem statement through the lens of one business unit, and that business unit itself was a very complex business unit. But really what we were looking at was for the whole company. There was a whole enterprise of not just business divisions, but horizontals that had to do with the brand, with the design, with the different engineering teams and various product teams that would also be impacted by any of the choices we made in this local single silo. And so, but it's really, really hard, not just within a single company across teams, but when you get into a large, complex corporation, I mean, the matrix, it starts to explode. And so again, if we think through the AI and the exponentiality of that, and then you think about a singular choice within a company, within the team, and its own interdependencies, but then you extrapolate that out into how that's going to have a ripple effect across other choices that these humans are making across their tools, across greater society. This is why the people who are making these initial choices really have to be thoughtful and do as much of the orchestration and simplification early and within an environment that they can still sort of control and influence. And so one of the tools that our teams used to help with this across business leaders, across agendas, across P&Ls, was to take the user flow and basically play it out, not just what is the single experience in time. And yes, this is a different use case because I couldn't actually show the other one, but take that flow and then map the different capabilities and the teams and how they are, like who's doing what and how that ladders up to the experience to give a sense of how many people are actually working on the same underlying capability. And are you making this, I mean, first of all, why do we have 7 teams building the same functionality? Let's reduce that. But second, maybe that's a good thing because different teams are coming from different perspectives and maybe are able to bring some innovation or some different ways of problem solving. And hey, let's put those heads together and find the most impactful solution for this. But actually laying it out with the user flow on one axis and with the different technologies or functions or features and what they support in the user interface is one really powerful way to help teams see, oh, here's how my stuff adds up to this end user solution and then how it's going to have an effect on them. And so just to circle back on the payments solution, it's a really happy story because, I mean, we're talking about a collections product, collections experience for consumers that, could be a really painful time in their situation. But the solution that we put together through that insight and through a lot of collaboration and through some really heavy orchestration to bring it to life actually became the highest NPS score at the company, which I think is pretty incredible to think about. Is like people at their lowest moment actually rated their satisfaction or their willingness to talk about this company in a positive way at the highest of any of the products at the time. And that speaks to just how powerful it can be when you really understand the need and you solve for it and you make that choice early such that it can actually have that effect. And if you start to play that out across products with larger audiences or longer lifespans, you really start to see how these will add up. So discovering that human insight, allowing some imagination, thinking maybe this might not be possible, they're going to say no, but giving it a chance to actually bake a little bit. And then before just putting it out there in one narrow perspective, thinking about the interdependencies and orchestration so that you're making good choices internally, saving money, saving time, getting the best ideas built in such that it's something that you can grow and have that greater impact on the human. Because ultimately, when I think about this AI chapter that we're moving into, AI, I mean, it's been around for a while, and really it's just another tool in our toolkit, but it's a really, really powerful one. And it's one that we, as humans with souls, as long as humans are going to be part of the problem statement and people using the solution, humans with souls have to be judges using discretion on the choices that we're making and why as we're designing and building these tools. Because, and I love this quote from Ray Eames, beyond this age of information is the age of choices. And all of you, all of us who do this work, have this really important and exciting responsibility, which is we get to make these choices, and then we're going to see the effects of them in ripples that we can't even imagine. So that's what I came to share, and I would love to now open it up and we can get more specific about AI, or we can talk about some of the other projects, but that's what I had to share.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Great.
That's really awesome. Thanks.
We had two questions that were kind of related to one another. One from David and one from me. David was asking, do you think that AI will be good at discovering a human insight?
Yes, what a great question. So one of the ways that I think AI is already helping us is giving us tools that can analyze patterns. So user research, whether it's video, transcriptional, interactive, it's able to process and pull patterns and hotspots and give some syntheses of what it's seeing much faster than any person could do it. But what's interesting is I think it's always going to be a partnership, because the tool can do that work, and it can make some really good, it can generate some really good, answers. But I think the human judge is always going to be needed to evaluate it, certainly while the AI is still learning, and probably for a very long time. And because otherwise it's just gonna learn and spiral out of control. And so humans, I think, are gonna have to kind of keep giving it the guardrails. But it's certainly gonna save us time and energy in, like, where do we start? Where might we focus our attention? And we're seeing a lot of really interesting tools on that.
I don't know if David wanted to follow up on that question, but I have one too. It's related. It says, in the example of getting the human insight, was the insight only from clicks, or were customers contacted to gather conversational information?
So anytime possible, I have teams go and actually interact with real humans in their real environment. You know, there is always click data, and there are, you know, the things that you're measuring and monitoring, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways. I mean, they're reacting to a system, a tool that's been built, versus what they might do in the real world if they didn't already have that interface to engage with. So even just today, I was talking to my team about some studies that we want to do with travelers, and you know, we were talking about, you know, when a service gets interrupted, when a flight gets, oh, hold on, my intern is stopping by to say goodnight. Can you take your face mask off, you silly goose?
I don't want to.
1 second.
The young intern.
That's my 7-year-old going to bed now at 9 o'clock. Go to bed. So, you know, we were talking about, you know, should the customers be reacting to some of the interfaces that we have? And I said, sure. But before we have them do that, I'd actually love to kind of get them into a scenario. First of all, I don't really want to go when like somebody's flight has been canceled. I don't think that's the time to like sit down and be like, all right, well, I'd love to talk to you about your feelings about, you know, air travel. That's not the right time. But you can get a traveler in and you can say, all right, here's the scenario. You know, we're gonna say you've booked a trip, you're at the airport, you're flying to Minneapolis. Oh, there's a snowstorm, something's been canceled. What we're listening for is, what are the words they'd use? Like, how are you're gonna call your husband and tell him what's going on. How do you talk about it? What's the language? What are the questions in your mind? It's that human, physical, real world that we all draw from, whether we know it or not, that I think is where the insights come from. And I can tell you from years of being in usability labs or watching people fill out surveys, people are really bad at self-reporting. They'll be like, I never do this thing. And you're like, I'm watching you do the thing right now. So I encourage both quantitative and behavioral data, as well as very open, qualitative, like Jane Goodall, you're watching the monkeys in the natural habitat.
Right. Well, you know, okay, I still have another question related to that then. You know that when you call in and you say, yeah, you get the message of this conversation can be recorded for training purposes and so on. Have you actually seen those or gotten involved in listening to those?
Yeah.
Well, those really exist then, right?
They absolutely exist. And every company I've ever been with, I have always sat side by side with our customer service team and listened to calls. That's one of the ways my team gathered an understanding of people who were in collections. They actually fielded calls themselves. They sat with the headset on, listening to how agents would resolve the calls. I'm doing the same thing at Delta. In fact, just a few weeks ago, there's a great program where we get to go behind the wings and actually serve as agents in the airport or on, you know, like in the baggage area, like we get to do all the jobs. But to your point, those conversations are typically, I mean, I'm thinking back to, you know, the Capital One call center. We completely redesigned the agent servicing tool system because they were being recorded. It was being parsed with AI, and it was used as machine learning for some of the early what are the highest problem areas? What are the words people use to describe them? How will that language inform what we put in the app and the UI so that we're using words and language that people will understand and be more likely to click on? Over time, it actually became a big part of how the Capital One chatbot was developed and how it learned. But on top of it, you know, using real humans, there was actually a conversation designer from Pixar who helped create the character and the tone, and of course, brand, making sure that it was, you know, the spirit of the chatbot was shaping the language and the conversation in a way that was true to the brand, while still solving the problems and addressing the customers. So it's I think all companies now are using recordings and machine learning to really start to find the patterns and the hotspots and learn from that, not just what to work on, but how to use it to solve problems in the interfaces or in the business problems.
You answered one of my questions I was thinking of as you were talking, so thanks. And I think Tony's got a question. I don't know, Tony, you want to ask it yourself?
Let me say it and flesh it out. Heather, you used human insight. I've been hearing artificial intelligence, and it makes me think of human intuition, which I think is different than intelligence. And maybe it's living in the same neighborhood as human insight. So my question for just riffing is, how would you say artificial intelligence, which is a little bit on the mechanical side, can be used synergistically with intuition? And I think of Steve Jobs, who I don't think he relied, well, I know that he didn't rely exclusively on intelligence. You know, he studied yoga, he went to India, he took some substances. But so I think that there's intelligence and intuition, and I'm wondering how you'd mix them up to make sure that we get to good places.
Yeah, that's such a, oh, I love that question. And I mean, it really, it cuts right to that, like, age old, like, is how much of this is art and how much of this is science, and who's the judge of whether it's good? Like, you can judge whether it works, yes or no, very binary, but is it of quality? You know, there are some things you can look at pixels in visual design and you can look at the quality of craft, like, you know, how is the, like, you know, how are the bevels, and you know, is it accessible in its contrast? But then how do you look at one thing and decide that it's cool and another thing and decide that it's clunky? I feel the same way about intelligence and intuition. It's almost like you know, IQ and EQ. So in some ways, I feel like AI has high IQ, but intuition is where the EQ comes in. Or, you know, there's something in there. I don't know. What do you all think?
I mean, that sounds right to me. I think that's a good answer. And Chris has got a really good question, which I was going to ask, but I like his, which is, I think it's like good versus evil. How do you use your powers for good versus evil? Anyway, thank you for answer.
Oh, yeah, Chris, did you want to comment, or did you have a question there? Chris Moyer?
Yeah, I can comment. So Heather, I don't know how much you geek out and really follow the research papers that get released, because it's a fire hose, you know, there's some, you know, a dozen a week, it seems like. And there's been a lot of research recently that says that LLMs are like, have the id of a toddler trying to get the cookie. You know, they don't care what it takes to get that cookie. If you say, you know, win at chess, they'll hack the chess algorithm and reload a game where they're winning and say, I won. And, you know, there's no ethics or morality baked into this technology. And it, you know, I'm sort of anthropomorphizing it here, but it can be a bad faith partner. And so how do you deal with a technology that is somewhat of a black box under the hood? you don't know how it ticks or what makes it go or what it was trained on. And well, maybe in your case you would know what it's trained on, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, this thing can run amok a little bit if you're not super careful in your sort of governing prompting of the thing. And so I think it's sort of a unique challenge in terms of, you know, if you have a credit card payment system, you know what it does. It processes payments and stuff like that. We have no idea what sort of, you know, it's like an octopus oozing through a crack. We have no idea what it's capable of or what the edge cases might even be. And so I think it's uniquely challenging to design
Yeah.
with something like this.
It really is. And I mean, I think most companies, I think the companies that we would say are, you know, at least do their best to be ethical, are putting governance bodies and AI ethics committees in place. You know, there's tons of work on ethical AI, there's tons of work on equitable AI, and because I mean, just like AI can, you know, LLMs can actually produce really dark results. I mean, the same thing's happening with just basic UI. Deceptive patterns are all over the place, you know, which, you know, we have to, it's our responsibility to, as designers, as builders, as problem definers, to be not just hopeful that it's going to go out and produce the right results, but actually put guardrails and constant monitoring in place to make sure that it hasn't gone, you know, off the edge.
Yeah, it seems like it's a sort of unique challenge in that you need to have these extra resources for exactly that purpose that you didn't need to have in case of, you know, typical visual design or
Yeah,
things like
you
that.
know, one of the things we did at Capital One was, you know, knowing that, you know, the more you have design systems and pattern libraries, I mean, you sort of need maybe fewer people who are really reimagining the interface all the time, just building from the kit of parts. But you can actually reuse resources, retrain resources, or just refocus resources on how do we build some of this in the first place. And so, for example, we had equity by design was one of the teams that I stood up specifically to think not through design patterns alone, not just visual UI patterns, but actually language patterns and equity patterns, such that anything we were building into the toolkit of the UI had gone through some rigor of, you know, is this ageist? Is this in some way discriminatory? Is this a flow that somebody, you know, would be able to approach? Or is there something before it that would get in the way? I think we need to be building in the same preemptive consideration, since I think we're going to get some, you know, we might get some freeing up of resources in other ways. Like if we're not having to have humans, you know, scour through and tag all of the ethnographic research videos, like let's actually use that really good, you know, research capability and judgment and ability to synthesize to help define and set guidelines for what we're building in the first place.
Good luck.
Would it be fair to say that the rules that govern and the way that you work with human people that you're doing your research with, it may not be different to an LLM? That, yeah, you know, the average person could scheme this. There could be the wrong demographic chosen for the research. Any number of things that the process and the outcome doesn't change. So because we're using LLMs now, we shouldn't remove some of those rules or processes that we currently have.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the training a toddler, the EQ of a toddler, I mean, in many ways, it feels like sometimes the conversations I have with my little, you know, where like it's going to push its boundaries, and especially if you watch people with like the generative art and how far it can go, you can see it push those edges, but you can even just in how you're prompting it, start to see it feel the edges and account for those edges, even just as conversations go. So my hope is that a consciously trained model with people and systems that are aligned on what are the principles and values that matter the most, like that's part of the work too.
Heather, I have a couple of thoughts I'd like to ask. One is, do you think, like in the next, half of this decade, do you think that AI, like a lot of discussion about replacing jobs in different use cases, in different cases, do you think AI will have an impact in terms of replacing a job like the one that you do?
So if we think about it from, say, let's start with a traditional designer. I think a lot of the facets, like a lot of the aspects of a design job could be replicated and kind of automated, or maybe, I mean, a lot of designers are using AI to be kind of exploratory and help them be creative. Great. But I think the thing that through my whole career, the whole art and science, that whole, oh, anybody can have an opinion on it. There's a craft and there's an experience, and maybe let me say it this way. Do you want the surgeon who has been book trained doing his first surgery on you, or do you want the one who's been doing it for 30 years and is able to adapt and improvise, but still use good judgment in that moment based on that? Like, I kind of look at it the same way. I think, well, I'll say I don't really want to live in a world where humans have been fully replaced, because I can't imagine that's going to be a fun world to be a human in.
Yeah, I hear you. It's like just basically wielding the new tool, and using it wisely. The other thing I want to ask and get your perspective on is, again, in the FileMaker community, where we're using the tool to build solutions for clients. So in a sense, we put ourselves in the shoes of the client. We learn about their problems. We emphasize and have empathy for what they're going through. Then we think through a solution. And I really like your visual where oftentimes we jump right to a solution and we try to implement it and not try to envision what things could be like in a different way. I'm curious to know how you would approach solving or improving the experience on both ends. Like, okay, so from our point of view, we're using a tool to help build these solutions. So we need to find, like if we're engineering the tool itself and building a better tool, what kinds of things can engineering do to give us better tools to build the things that we need to build? And I think you know where I'm going. And the other side is, okay, now we have these creative things. How do we put them to use so that we can make our clients' experiences so much more, enlightening, better, something that helps them get their job done and they feel so much more encouraged to go to work, let's say.
Yeah. It's funny because you really just articulated one of the fundamental challenges we had back when I was leading design for FileMaker, which was a little bit of, well, you know, you can be creative about a solution as long as it's a form or a table, right? Like that was sort of like, and one of the early prototypes I did, I don't think this ever saw the light of day, but it really was about, it really was like observing the customer in their natural environment, what, like mapping out their process, using that as the starting point. And I know when you get into like the you know, the diagrams and the different entities and relationships, a lot of times that's happening. But I definitely saw a lot of the coding mindset like jumping ahead to, well, I know how I'm gonna have to build it, so I'm just gonna like, you know, shoehorn the problem into this view or this construct.
Right.
And so that's where I think, you know, and I haven't kept up with you know, how FileMaker has evolved, but from one of the things I always said to developers and to my teams was, okay, step one, close your laptop, go to the whiteboard, and actually just like let a flow of consciousness come out in terms of what's the problem, what's the flow first. Like try to let go of what you know about the tool and how it's going to be built so that you can capture what's the human essence of this, and better yet, observe that and document it, and then open the tool and ask yourself, how can I fit to the customer versus the other way around? I don't know if FileMaker's gotten any further on that.
It's so interesting you say that, just because, just to follow up really quick, and that is just because, you know, there's been so much competition in the space, right? When you say tables and rows and columns or whatever, and you've had some interesting companies come into the space like Monday.com or Airtable or whatever, and they think, and I think exactly to your point, which is, oh, let's think about this from a human-centric perspective. I have tasks. How do I organize them? Oh, like a Kanban board surface somehow, somewhere, or some other view of the data in a creative way, so that people then all of a sudden like were gravitated towards that solution and say, wow, that really suits me, or that really helps me organize what I do, right? So rather than the mindset of like rows and columns and tables and views, now you have another way to interact with data, right? It's kind of a visualization concept, but anyway, yeah, great point. Thank you.
By the way, your example for the collections, that was great because the yeah, I just recently had to deal with that. It was a pest control company, wasn't doing their job. They kept taking payments. It was like the magician's nephew. They just kept coming and kept collecting payments, and I said, "Hey, stop!" And they wouldn't stop. And so I said, "Hey, we're not." I let the credit card run out, and I said, "Yeah, we're not paying you anymore." And then they sent me to collections, and I was like, yeah. It was just like it just steamrolled the whole way through, and without even listening to the customer. So,
yep.
Alexi, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, I was just making a snarky comment that FileMaker really hasn't changed since Heather was paying attention, at least not like from a, you know, gestalt and design point of view. Lots of new features. But certainly, you know, like, I mean, I started my whole career with Claris 1.0 in tech support. And you know, it had always just bugged me that, you know, tech support was considered a career that everyone needed to migrate out of. And I mean, I did, and right, everybody does, but it was a phenomenal learning experience of listening, right?
oh yeah.
And all of the, like, so many, like early on, a guy named Scott who worked there who was great and gave some of us newbies some training. And the first thing he said was open-ended questions, right? Like no yes or no questions. And I realized that like for no, yes or no questions, 50% chance wrong answer. Like, how can that be? But it really was. And the number one bias was people would tell you what they thought you wanted to hear. Like I remember one woman one day, she said to me, she said, well, what should it say? You know, asking her to read. And I said, well, if it said what it should say, you wouldn't have called me. So let's just let go of that and take it from there. And then she kind of said, like, I could hear her sort of sitting up straight when I said that, because she was like, oh, she's right. You know?
Yeah.
And
Well,
so, you know, and we used to have people come and sit with us too, including Dominique and and the VP of engineering. Was great because one day he was sitting with me and it was like some real problem that I couldn't immediately, and then like pretty soon we had the usual like hive mind in the middle of the cube farm, and he didn't know the answer, and he was just watching us problem solve in real time, and he's like, wow, this is so interesting. Like clearly he had never met anybody who actually used the product.
Yeah. You know, you're reminding me of one of my favorite projects ever. And it was when we were at past company designing, like really redesigning the agent tool system. And the problem statement was, these poor agents have 17 separate software applications to deal with while they're also on a call, having to have a conversation, like using notepads, using calculators, all these things. How can we streamline and aggregate this into a single tool and interface? Okay, well, my team went and did side-by-sides with the agents, and really the insight they had in that particular problem, that project, was the real solution here isn't just a single tool. The real, like the power here is we have hundreds, thousands of customer service agents who do this all day, every day, who live and breathe these problems, who know, like, who are using their brains to figure out ways of problem solving. And all of that organic knowledge is lost. That is not in any way captured. And so what the team did was proposed a tool that had the elemental building blocks of the, you know, the area of customer service that they were starting with, happened to be fraud resolution. What were the elemental building blocks or starting points of some of the conversations? But they built a modularized, rather than a script with a tree that was fixed, they built a modularized flow such that the customer support agent could start the conversation and then grab parts of it and solution elements as they were going along the solution. And as they had an idea for how to solve for this customer, they were able to type in what they were doing and why. And those modules actually became part of the system. So now all of these agents are able to infuse their expertise and organic solutioning into the customer service solution. And that's actually what kind of like, it just became it became the solution that was then expanded across the rest of the company for customer support.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, like, just all of that knowledge and expertise, like, imagine using that to train the system itself. Like, it's wild.
You know, you guys bring up a interesting point too. It's like, you know, because historically we've been drawing upon like first level support and program testers and things like that eventually become, you know, your engineers and things like that later on. Well, what happens when you lose that pool of people because AI can do those first level support and do some of that, all that testing for you, and then you no longer have people who have to look at those things anymore.
That's a good point. I mean, I think, or I hope, if, you know, as this career continues, as all of our work, you know, starts to kind of be passed into the next generations, like remembering who you are and that machines can't do everything for you. Like, I think one really interesting and hopeful example for me was when we were in the pandemic and when things became so virtual and expectations changed so much for what, like, how everything should be done through an app now, and all businesses should have a way to, you know, order and deliver, and then there was this whole groundswell of people who were taking active technology breaks and who were deciding to get rid of smartphones and who were going back to handcrafts. And like, I think my hope is that we saw enough of like the essence of being human and physical, like almost looking to balance that. My hope is we're doing that in the professional world as well. But I have hope.
Any more comments or questions? I know people make comments and questions in the chat, but they're not bringing them up in the open here, so they might just be for the chat. I don't know.
I'm going to echo what Heather said, that I think that the last 4 or 5 years has certainly given a lot of people fresh perspective as to how they want to live their lives. And picking up on something Vince said, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, what happens when AI takes the white collar jobs away and robots take the blue collar jobs away? There is still the opportunity to grow healthy food. There's a lot of land out there that's not looking so great. And if you spiff it up and get it all mineralized, it's not a bad life. And some people will take that option. I don't know how to, and you could roll that up into a corporation as well. It's a profitable enterprise. You take land that's broken down, you fix it up with little design principles, little permaculture design, and then you flip it, or just stay there.
You know, what you just said prompted me to just think a little bit about, you know, my new role at Delta, and, you know, just the looking at how does Delta, which is such a huge physical operation, I mean, that is constrained not just by physics, but like by the weather. I mean, the forces, you know, that it's dealing with. What does it mean to be digital, and how does digital help problem solve and amplify? A big thing I talk about is we're not here to digitize this. We're here to think about how digital capabilities can actually empower all of these people who have to do these physical jobs. And so when we think about like how much might be replaced by machines and AI, I like to think about how can that actually help give the energy back to the people, like the flight attendants or the, you know, gate agents or the, you know, ground crews, so that they don't have to do the menial, tedious tasks. They can actually do what they're best at doing, which is the service work at hand. I like to think about how we can actually help people be more present and more empowered because of technology.
Yeah, we should make it clear to the robots that they work for us.
Yep.
No, you're just there to give them cookies, remember?
You know, the talk lately about agents and tools and AI and agentic kind of frameworks, all this. You know, I could see how that could evolve in terms of you know, when you're talking to an agent and you need to rebook a flight, I mean, that's a perfect situation where you could just say to an agent, an AI agent, go find me a flight for this person to get them back to New York before the end of this week. And these are the constraints, and go figure it out, you know? And it doesn't have to be a person scrambling through Saber's system to try to figure out, like, you know, okay, how do I book this flight and all that, right? It's possible. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, the announcement about the digital concierge, I think, was very much from a consumer perspective. Like, you know, you shouldn't have to navigate through menus anymore to just ask and get a question answered if you have one, or you know, solve a task or do something simple. But if we're doing it right, I mean, that should be the brain power of anybody who's interacting with the system. Like, it's a set of data. You're asking questions of it. It needs to give you answers and responses. It should know who you are, what your context is, and give you the right thing.
yeah. Yeah.
I think
Keeping
in terms of
sorry, no, you go ahead.
sorry, in terms of airlines these days, I mean, when I go to book a flight, it's still the same thing. It is, where do you want to go? Where are you going from? Where do you want to go to? What date do you want to go on? Here are a range of flights. The AI sort of stuff these days should be more in line of, you know, I want to go to Sydney for a conference, and the conference is on these days, and I probably need a hotel, and I prefer to fly in the morning rather than the afternoon. Find me the best thing. But there's nothing like that out there to be able to book a flight at the moment.
Nope, there is nothing out there.
Isn't
I
that isn't that the human that was sitting at the travel agents
Right?
rather than the AI agent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just had the most wonderful lunch with a Gen Z colleague, and it was like this aha moment of like, wait a minute, how did you book flights before the internet? Like, hold on, I gotta get my dentures back in and my cane to tell the story.
You call AAA travel agent.
Right? Or you go to the ticket office downtown.
Yes. Look at the little books that are published on the flights.
So my figure skating club board gave the task to our junior board of sending all of the test certificates to the members who had passed tests, like pile of them, like 120 certificates. They all came back to the club PO box because these very conscientious teenagers put the club's address in the to spot on the envelope and who it was to in the front. They did not know how to address an envelope. So they did them all exactly backwards, and they all came back to us. They're like, what's mail? What's an envelope? What's an address? Like, what is all of this? No clue.
Oh my gosh. I gotta tell you, it's fascinating for me to see the world through my 7-year-old's eyes.
Right.
You know, and like I one day I was like, oh, I don't know if she knows what the mailbox is. What's the red flag on it for? We'll go have a talk. I mean, I'm like, and then I'm like, when is she ever gonna use this?
We tend to be using a lot of airline analogies at the moment. And we traveled recently and they were moving us around gates. And so the announcement was made. I went up to the desk and said, sorry, which gate are we going to? I just told you that. I just made the announcement. Well, nobody heard it. And then everyone looked at their phones, got the automated announcement from their app, and then moved across. Nobody could hear the announcement.
Yeah.
It wasn't, it wasn't audible, but the personality, the person doing it said, well, I just told you that. I just made an announcement. and everyone was still not sure where to move, and everyone had different language backgrounds. But as soon as everyone got the notification, we all moved across.
I find that airport audio systems must be a special kind of audio that deliberately scrambles everything that anyone says, because you can't understand a thing.
Same delivery company as does the train station announcements as well.
Yeah. Well, it really is, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to know. I mean, when you think about not just airlines, but lots of companies that started as physical operations that then built individualized software solutions for pieces of the operation. And then, now it's in a time and space where like the expectation of general consumers is, well, it's software can do that now. It should be able to talk to each other. Like the expectation is just that things should work. And I mean, some industries just have not been working in that way and building, the technical infrastructure for where we are now. I mean, society's been evolving way faster from that. And so I'm actually, before I took this job, so I was not flying with Delta. I was flying with a different airline, and I was in a delay. And the notification I got on my phone, the announcement that was made, and the writing on the board said 3 different things. And I mean, you're just like, oh my goodness, like which one is right? And then if you call, you might get a different answer. And I mean, that to me is one of those, like, we got to figure that out. It's costing consumers, it's costing, the company. There's so much risk involved. And I mean, I think everybody's scrambling to get that synchronized.
Yeah. It's totally agree with the audio systems in airports. The other confusing thing is you're in one gate and you hear the announcement for the other gate, and you might assume like it's your announcement because you might have missed some part of it. It's just audio is such a bad medium to communicate that information, especially in a large place where the gates are very close to one another and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well,
The solution to that in some of the airports here has been, all right, well, we don't give announcements anymore. You just have to read the board.
if you look back at Delta's CES exhibit from a few years ago, it was a prototype of a board that was using this advanced pixel technology that was sensing who the customer was standing in front of it, and they would see their personalized screen. And there were 100 people standing in front of that board, and each of them was seeing their own message. And it was really, really cool. That sort of blew my mind. That was, just being explored and like actually a thing that could happen.
Like right out of Blade Runner.
Yeah.
They actually have that in the Detroit airport.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Vince, you mentioned Sabre before with the airline interface.
Yeah.
I've had to deal with that so many times, and I don't even think there's an API there for at the moment. You sort of.
The reason I know Sabre is because when I lived in Montreal, we had friends who ran a travel agency and would book flights for people. Like you'd call them and say, "Can you book me a flight?" And I once leaned over and looked at the screens that they were using, and it was using, what looked like if you ever sat in front of a terminal, Unix terminal, and typed commands. It was just something very similar to that. Yeah.
If you look up Deltamatic, that was Delta's first system. And it is still available for people to use, and a lot of agents still use it.
And there are other systems, a system called Tarmac as well that other agents use. So it's sort of my wife worked in travel for a long time, and moving between different places. She worked with Qantas, she worked with American Express, worked with travel agents, and they all use different systems that plug into the same thing. But when you move from one place to another, you need to learn this new system. So you don't use Sabre here, use Tarmac, and I have to remember all the command keys for that to get into that. So, and it's still a very antiquated process for the people who are still in travel.
Yeah. And it's
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Darren, did you want to say something else about Sabre? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, just the fact that I thought it was just something we had to put up with down here in Australia, but obviously it's something that you've got in the US there as well.
Yeah.
Well, and just as backwards.
Yeah.
Well, there's no API because it's like 50 years old or something. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Written in COBOL or something.
Be using an API to get its information. They display it that way.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there are still some very highly paid COBOL programmers out there maintaining that system.
You know, what's fascinating to me is that, like Heather, I'm also intrigued about the complexity of airlines, just, airplane getting off the ground, taking you from one place to another, etc. It's just mind-boggling. The engineering, the technology, the people, everything. But what fascinates me, I think, is that the industry can work because there's a period of sleep, of rest. Like if you go to an airport, there is a period where all the chaos, all the madness kind of comes to an end at the end of the day. And there's a period of time where, yes, there are flights maybe at 5:30 in the morning or something like that, but there is some period of time where things go to sleep and they're not running all the time. I don't know, honestly, how things would recover if it was functioning all the time, So I don't know, maybe that reprise is a good thing in a sense, mimicking human sleep in a sense.
What's making me think of, haven't they recently discovered that as you're sleeping, there's actually a wave of hormones that's it's coursing through a different stream of it within your body, and it's sort of almost like rinsing your neurons.
Interesting.
Which is one of the reasons, like, if you don't go into I think it's deep sleep versus REM sleep. If you don't go into enough deep sleep, the wave doesn't have enough time to do the full refresh. I found that really, so that's what it's making me think of. It's just like that wave that comes through to kind of reboot for the morning.
Yeah.
Well, AI had that problem.
Yeah, and AI is just accelerating everything, and I think I don't know. I think that the lure of AI is that we feel like we give it more trust than we should, and we should always be questioning it, at least as in these early instances of it evolving. I know for myself, I asked some simple questions of things and was stunned to see, like, in total in total, how do you say, confidence, giving an answer that was like, well, that's absolutely wrong. You didn't, that's not right. And simple things too, but
People do that all the time, though.
On the other side, it's totally fascinating to see what it does, what it can do, you know?
You know, that I feel like sometimes, and this is going to be one of those critical practices, if you start seeing it go into a wrong place, my worry is teams and people might be like, oh, but we put so much money and time into that training and evolution. And I think we have to be willing to say, oh, we've reached a point of garbage, like toss it, start over, or identify where it started to veer and be okay with the sunk cost in service of the better outcome. I think it's gonna be hard for people to do. It's gonna be big.
Yeah, definitely a difficult one.
So at the start of Heather's presentation, Heather, you had a bunch of videos of tools. And I think that that's a savvy way of looking at AI. Is a tool. It is, I'm not, paranoid about what it'll do. I think it is important that, that we think of it as a tool. And also, when you get right down to it, it's pre-existing knowledge that's packaged up into language models and algorithmically utilized. So it's not doing anything. It's not doing any new thinking. It's vulnerable to being programmed from an ideological point of view. In other words, I would trust AI to give me just straight factual information. There's a whole range of things where I wouldn't trust it to give me sort of a balanced opinion on anything. So I think it's a tool, and hopefully it will liberate people from, as Heather, you said, the mundane things, and, free them to sit by the lakeside and write great poetry, or to come up with ideas that have never, ever been thought, that don't exist in any language model, and move us forward in ways that are new and fun and happy.
Well said.
Maybe we should start talking about the 4-day weekend. There was a time actually when I think people used to work more days, and then there was like I guess we have a 2-day weekend. I skipped over the 3-day weekend. Those are nice too. Maybe baby steps.
People died to get you the weekend, just so you know. For real.
Yeah.
Is that they were fighting the Pinkertons?
Yeah, just look up Haymarket Massacre. You can Google it.
Well, then I'm going to make the most of my weekends, just as a way of honoring the sacrifice.
Trying to find a video I wanted to share, but I can't find it right now, unfortunately. It's a video of some person talking about how, or actually this person uses some tools to visualize how the AI generates the results, because again, it's probabilistic, right? So they're also trying to understand and see where it comes to those answers and how it comes to those answers. So, but this person did such a great job, and so visually representing the process of, coming up with what the next prediction of the word is.
I know exactly who you're talking about. It's visualizing transformers. It's a young guy, really enthusiastic.
Yeah. Do you have the link to it? If you can post it.
I will find it. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Here it is. I found it.
Yeah, no, that's again, when I learned programming in Phoenix, I took a programming class. It was I forget the actual title of the class, but it was just a general class to learn about general concepts of programming. And the three constructs were, statements, conditionals, and loops. And that's what all languages are based on, And now with neural networks, we have this other paradigm shift, which neural networks were being evolved and worked on for some time, but now it's in the forefront, because now we have the neural networks in these models and everything, right? And that's a whole other thing that is like in programming logic and design, you can see where the flow of the logic is going. Whereas in this other stuff, it's all probabilistic, you know, and you can't really, it's almost like Schrodinger's, whatever, you know, like, I don't
Schrodinger's
know,
cat.
Cat.
Schrodinger's cat or whatever, but it's just,
Well, yeah, I think classic traditional machine learning is also black box, although it's not all probabilistic, but it's still very black box, where it's,
uh-huh, yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, folks,
And
I am looking at the time on my
Yeah.
coast here and saying I'm going to bid you a thank you and stay well and call it a night here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Yeah,
Great
so
to
good
see
to
you.
see you. Thank you.
Okay, bye, Heather. Thanks.
Is everyone leaving?
Uh,
Anyways, Vince, I did jump in, but some of the classical ones are deterministic, but they're still black box, right? Yeah.
oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you post that link? Is that what I see? Looks
Oh, I
like
posted the link. You said yes. Oh, yeah.
is this the one? I don't know. I think that's the one. Oh yeah,
I
that's
think
the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's the best one. When
Yeah, yeah,
if
no,
you
that's
think
the-
a young guy who's really enthusiastic,
Yeah. That's
and like
that's the
knows
one
a
I
ton.
found.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
And
forget
I may have
the
gotten it from you. I think I got it from
yes,
you.
that's
Yeah.
yeah. I just didn't know where I posted it, but
Yeah.
really incredible the way he articulates it and visualizes it. And I forget what he uses some software to actually generate the visualizations of it,
Yeah.
which is very cool.
Here's a
Anyway,
link regarding, this is just one I found real quick regarding my comment. Yeah.
yeah, anyway, it was really great to see Heather come and speak and share her journey and looked like a very interesting journey through all the different companies that she's worked at and how things have evolved and
A very good perspective on it too.
yeah.
Well, at this point, we have like an endless supply of former Claris employees we could draw upon.
Anyway, I appreciate
It's in
you all joining.
tomorrow. What do we have?
do we have do we know what
FM disc?
well it's tomorrow. So tomorrow is the LA FM, that's right, FM disc. And then next month is any announcements about next month?
No.
Oh, Chris is
You have a presentation tomorrow, Chris?
Chris was flashing gang signs there.
I'm hosting tomorrow.
Oh,
Couple of
What's
guys
happening
from
tomorrow?
Engage You. So we have Fabrice Nordman, who some of you know. Vince certainly knows him.
Presenting one
And
more thing.
Jonathan, I can't recall his last name right now, but he did a great talk on doing a PDF embedding AI implementation that doesn't use, any of this stuff. He just ran it up to the cloud and said, "Here, figure this out for me."
And Nicholson?
No, it's not Nicholson. It's doggone it. I want to say Anderson, but that's not right either.
I'll go get the name.
Thing. It is. Let's see. The January agenda. Jonathan Jeffrey, that's it.
Oh, yeah.
That comic book character.
That's two first names.
Yes, it is. Anyway, I had not heard him speak before. I heard him in Malmo for the first time, and I was like, wow, this is a really good talk, and it's really clean and simple. And I mean, a lot of people, I think, make this overly complicated, and he just like said, here, knock this out. And it's such a hit that he was given an assistant, and they're starting to roll out this concept to all different parts of their organization. So it's a huge win in FileMaker using AI, not any sort of implementation that like Ronnie demoed at Engage. And so I thought it was important for the community to lay eyeballs on this implementation.
Also, he's a veritable paleontologist specializing in giant predatory somethings.
Rhizodonts.
It's another
What's it
that was
done?
on my list of things to learn more about.
What are dawns?
Rhizodonts.
What are Johns?
Was he on a TV show called Friends by any chance?
Anyway, should be a good tech-heavy thing. Fabrice is talking about OData.
And Julie Sig is in there talking about Claris Engage.
That's right.
So it's a triple header.
Huh. And then we got to figure out next month. Is that what you were saying? Somebody was saying earlier?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
us.
do we know what DIGFM is doing? We know it'll be awesome, but do we know what
Yeah.
it will be?
Well, there was rumor that we were going to have a president of a company that we all depend upon. He was going to come and speak, but he couldn't make Thursday evenings. So we have to find an alternate time.
So we're going to hear from Tim Cook, huh?
Could be.
We would do
Things
that.
keep changing.
Yeah, I would totally sign up for listening to that. I
So
love the
yeah, there was
story.
talk about maybe
Alternate day.
alternate weeks so that we're not back
Oh,
to back
yeah.
with the LA.
Do you guys all know
Is-
Dan Weiss?
Oh.
Yeah.
A data sol.
Datasol? Yeah.
Yeah.
He bought, I think, just a share of Apple stock so he could attend the shareholders meeting, and got there early and sat up front. And when Tim Cook finished doing the briefing and asked for questions, his was the first hand up, and he's like, "Why don't you do more with FileMaker?" And put Tim Cook on the spot at the annual shareholder meeting.
And what did Tim say?
Sounds like, yeah.
I don't remember his answer. It was a fairly, non-committal answer. But other people in the audience applauded when he said,
"Oh, wow,
doing more with FileMaker," and there was a smattering of applause, like, "Yeah, you should be doing more with FileMaker."
They use it internally. For some reason, they don't like to publicize that.
It
I don't know why.
violates Apple's user interface guidelines.
Which these days are worthy of violation.
Yeah.
All
But
right.
anyway, I love that story about Dan Weiss buttonholing Tim Cook.
Plus the
In a
stock
very
has done
public
well.
forum.
Should have bought 100 shares to get to the meeting.
That was this year, huh?
No.
That was how
Oh,
long ago?
this was years ago,
Yeah, that
like
was
2021, maybe 2021 or 2020.
So we didn't see much fruit of that.
What'd you say?
So we didn't see much fruit of that confrontation then.
No, but I love the story.
Well, they are working together, right? They're working together on the
School manager.
school manager, right? There was the British people, the Brighton user group, which is international meeting, but centered out of Brighton, England. There was a post-meeting cocktail hour where they turn off the recording, and everyone at the last one, everyone was playing, "This is how I'd run FileMaker and Apple" while I'm at it.
We were there.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. We're still recording here, so.
We could turn off the recording.
Yeah, we're recording here. Looking for all the dirt.
No. You're not going to hit. There's things that are going to be said when the recording is on, and there's things that will only be said once the recording is off. And I do think that if you go to enough user group meetings, you see different styles, and having a portion of the meeting where the recording is off widens the number of topics that can be covered on the given meeting.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be overly praising FileMaker Incorporated while being recorded, because it would just, give them a swelled head.
Yeah.
Because I
Well,
personally have
nothing to be
nothing
done.
but good things to say about Apple and FileMaker.
All development would stop if you
Hmm.
made it sound too good.
I thought yeah, I thought the talk went really well
Yeah.
with Heather. I just was I was maybe expecting more in terms of her thoughts about AI and how they're
Mhm.
going about implementing it, etc.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, the human, what was it called? The human part
Right.
of the that solution,
Human insight
human
was the
insight.
phrase.
Yeah.
I wonder if, like, I mean, the human insight was really just
Human
more
insight.
like
Humans with
giving.
humans insight.
Well,
That was
it was
that was the
more
phrase that Heather used, was human insight.
right, but um, it was more like flexibility of choices. Like it wasn't really like, oh, tell me what caused. Like at first, I heard Heather say something about like we want to learn what put you in this predicament. Like, oh, my wife broke her leg and we had some surgery and we couldn't afford it. I put it on a credit card and now I'm like 10,000 in a
A Capital
hole.
One credit card. She's
Yeah,
not there
Capital
anymore.
One. Yeah. So I just don't I don't know if they were capturing the user story of the situation or predicament. It was more like
I agree. Yeah.
you
I,
know
I, I thought
I,
it
I
was fair. I mean, she's navigating corporate structures,
Well, yeah.
which
They're trying to
have their
figure out how to
nature.
get paid, really. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's exactly, and it was very surprising also to see the layers. Like that was really like to me, I've never seen something like that where it's like, oh well, I mean, there's branding, there's different groups that are needing to also maybe use the same code to solve other problems about collection, and we're not just the only ones, and it's like that layering diagram that she showed that was like, wow, I never thought of it that way, like. But yeah, it's navigating a corporate culture.
And doing it holistically across a large enterprise, because Capital One's gigantic, FileMaker's gigantic, and to bring that, what do you call it, 5,000 feet up in the air view, and to have it all come out somewhat consistently, so it's not mishmash.
But what's interesting is, so there's a little bit of talk about people expect systems to talk to each other. And from what I see with, if any place, any, company, university, think like AT&T, they have all these disparate systems, and that's not what's going to help their stock, is getting all their, even Apple and Claris, is getting these systems to talk to each other. And so investing in this technology and moving forward, like their internal infrastructure is not a money-making thing, but look at how much money they're spending on their companies. The ones she's worked at are spending on branding and marketing, all the stuff she was showing, versus I'm guessing, or that's what she was talking about. The systems don't talk to each other, and they could. We all know they could, right? If someone invested technology in all these old, disparate systems, they could all talk to each other, but that's not the thing that gets them customers, unfortunately. It loses them customers, probably. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, you reduce expenses, you increase revenues, or you reduce expenses. Either way, it drops to the bottom line.
Yeah.
I
But
was
think of,
fascinated.
I mean, look at our roads, some of our physical infrastructure in the US. But then if you have been in a company or have been a customer support company, you realize how much our tech infrastructure is crumbling, right? Because it's you know, it's being attacked, it's being, you know, I don't mean to be but it was interesting she brought that up about the expectation of these systems, but no one does anything about it, right? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I also found it, you know, fascinating that even at her level, she gets to play the role of an agent.
Wow.
You know, we'll we'll send you to to sit at the airport in Houston or whatever, and you'll get trained a little bit, but you'll do the job of an agent, and you know it's always great to
Yeah.
be able to be hands-on and
Yeah.
actually deal with the things that you're trying to design and help
Yeah.
improve.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just incredible. Like, instead of just having an explanation of like, well, we have this machine and it works this way and we need, to program when the machine can operate and who can use it or whatever. You actually go and touch the machine and use the machine, and you get a whole other perspective on the solutions that you build for clients. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Every once in a while I do that and I go, well, you've been doing it like this all this time?
yeah, exactly. That's why sometimes I wish more engineers at FileMaker use the product, because then they'd see how frustrating it is in some certain areas, and they would just say, "Oh my God, there's no way I'd ever use something like this," and like just crazy.
Speaking of AI, turn to the left, Vince. Turn to the left.
Turn to the left.
Where? Who's left?
Turn to the right. No, turn to the right. A little further. A little further. Keep going. Keep going. No, it's just not doing it this time. Earlier you were looking to the left and your nose disappeared. You're right.
Green screen.
Yeah.
Guess I'll see everybody there tomorrow. Well, of course I'm working, so I'll be in and out.
It's work related.
Yeah. I got deadline related. Yeah, speaking of, I opened up this meeting late for Heather to test, because our duo authentication method system, I don't know what happened, but it got screwed up and messed up everybody, and then we couldn't log into our systems, and including this Zoom meeting.
It finally worked though at the last minute.
Oh yeah, pretty last minute. So I guess backup plans are good.
So the beginning of the next half of this decade.
Yeah, that's what that meeting was, right?
Yeah. Ecosystems 2030. She mentioned that in her talk. I wonder if there's a recording of it or something. But
that she's referring to?
This talk is kind of the talk that she gave is also something that she presented at Ecosystems 2030.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like maybe a vision of like what companies should be paying attention to in the next 5 years leading up to 2030. But
pasted a link in the chat.
Oh yeah,
for the
there
event.
it is. Oh yeah, okay, cool.
Thank you. That makes us a chat worth exporting. Let me see that.
I'm gonna drop off.
Yep.
Bye,
See you.
guys.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, Heidi.
Everybody. Good job, Vince. Way to
Thanks.
rope in the old alum.
What's that?
Way to rope in the old alum.
Yeah, well, just ask. You never know what you get.
That's right.
I'll ask Tim Cook next week.
Yeah, there you go.
Box of
All right,
chocolates.
see ya.
Bye, Chris.
All right. I'm going to sign off as well.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Great work on the artwork as usual, Eric.
Oh, I tried to be as gentle as possible and not.
Yeah.
I had it over her eye and said, but that looks kind of sinister. I'm not gonna.
No, that's
No, you did a great job. You did a
That's
great
good.
job.